I'm filming in a new spot. What a shocker. I also have Diet Dr. Pepper instead of Diet Coke this time. Just switching my life up. I have another scary story for you guys, and this one I actually found myself. I have been reading a lot of paranormal stories lately, and honestly those are my favorite stories to read, and it's kind of also the reason that all of this started, was because I had all of these paranormal things happening to me, so I wanted to go back to that kind of stuff instead of like the scary stalker stories. I wanted to read something paranormal. So this story is called Poltergeists Aren't Ghosts, They're So Much Worse. I've been reading up on plenty of paranormal experiences lately, especially since I started having my own. Once you've seen enough of them, you begin to notice all of the little tropes and archetypes that link them together. From cold spots appearing around the house, to misplaced objects and inexplicable noises, the list goes on. Humanity's fascination with ghosts and monsters has spanned thousands of years. You see, in one form or another, these same rules have always applied, to the extent that it's become almost a rite of passage for many cultures across the world. To us, these spiritual traditions are cliches now, all tired fantasies like Ouija boards and Victorian seances. Let me guess, you're wondering why someone who has their own paranormal experience is such a skeptic about ghosts, right? Well, that's because poltergeists aren't ghosts. They're so much worse. Of course, things never started with a bang. Situations like this have a long fuse, and you're lucky if you hear the fizzle before the whole damn thing explodes. For me, it just started with plates, plain average dining plates that I'd left in the sink to wash, only to return and find them clean, dried, and stacked neatly next to the basin. Being a rational person, I assumed that I'd done it myself and forgotten about it. When I'm under stress, my memory is like a colander full of sand, anyway. Even when the little needle in my mind began the slow shift from forgetfulness to paranormal occurrences, the force inhabiting my little one-bedroom house didn't seem like much of a nuisance to me. Occasionally I'd lose the TV remote, or I'd find my car keys in a strange place. But when you weigh that against cleaning the crockery and making the garbage disappear, the force seemed almost more benevolent. If I'm honest, at this point I didn't truly believe that I was dealing with a supernatural entity. To attribute a series of moved items to ghosts and ghouls before ruling out more logical explanations is just an exercise of wishful thinking. Though things got weirder after my underwear started disappearing. What's more, it was only ever my older underwear that went missing, as though the thief knew I'd be less likely to notice that those were the ones that were gone. All the strangeness got relegated into the back of my mind by my nephew's upcoming birthday party. He's gonna be 7, and last year I made the grievous error of making him a birthday cake myself. In that moment, I underwent the miraculous transformation from Claire Moore to Super Aunt, and with great power comes great responsibility of making a jaw-dropping cake every year. After all, there's no disappointment without expectations, and God, do I miss having those. There were monoliths of eggs, butter, and flour piled onto my kitchen countertop. I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, just agonizing over what the hell I was gonna make for this kid. 10 years ago, making a birthday cake for a 7-year-old was like shooting fish in a barrel. You want Buzz Lightyear or Shrek? These days, God only knows. I was hefting the bag of flour over to the mixing bowl when I felt something cold and stiff brush through my hair, followed by something moving, something alive. I screeched in shock, dropping the flour back onto the countertop. The bag split in two, filling the room with a cloud of brilliant white. The cloud highlighted distortions in the air, like something that was moving but couldn't be seen. The figure was vaguely human-shaped, and released an angry thrum of clicks when the flour stuck to it, as though it were suddenly taken back by being revealed to me like this. It shook the flour off of its lightning-fast body and slipped back into an empirical non-existence just as quickly. In spite of its attempts to disguise itself again, that thing was unquestionably human, at least in shape. Screaming like I was at death's door, I bolted past the space where I assumed it to be, and scrambled down the hallway towards my front door. Enraged clicking and the heavy crunch of bony footsteps echoed in the halls behind me. I grabbed the handle and tore open the front door, ready to practically jump out, when I felt its skeletal fingers catch around my throat, flinging me back into the hallway, almost effortlessly. Clutching my aching neck, I tried desperately to catch my breath while the door slammed shut, and the invisible figure, the poltergeist, that had somehow been in my house this whole time, turned the keys until the loud click of falling tumblers rang, before snapping it off the lock. There was no getting out now, at least not through that door. It gave another angry hiss and a brief series of clicks, as if to say, "Look what you made me do," and dropped half of the shattered key onto my body. After that, I thought it was all over. I closed my eyes and started weeping quietly, expecting to feel those cold fingers around my throat any second now. It threw me like a rag doll. It could probably have snapped my neck with a gentle squeeze. But that never happened. Instead, I felt cold hands slide under the small of my back and lift me to about 3 feet off the ground. I gasped in shock at first, but realized that for some reason, my invisible home invader didn't mean me any physical harm. Being in its arms, I could hear all of the clunky, labored exhales that rattled in its chest. It almost felt human when you're that close to it. The poltergeist lowered me, and I do mean lowered, not dropped. onto a sofa in my living room and seemed to waft out the door, the only indication of its presence being the breeze it generated with every movement. The relief of not being mauled was suddenly tainted by wondering just how many times I'd felt that breeze before and thought of it as nothing. Before I could even finish that thought, a glass of water seemed to levitate into the room, at roughly the same height that I'd been carried. Somehow this was more confusing than it just ripping my throat out. The glass hovered in front of me, and stayed there until the poltergeist nudged me with one of its decidedly rough fingers, signaling for me to take it. In my mind, I was trying to collate everything I knew about this thing. Invisible but corporeal. Intelligent but unable to speak. Generally unaggressive, but possesses deadly strength when tested. I realized that I learned more about the supernatural in those few seconds than any other living person on Earth, and I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified out of my skin. Or both, I guess. From the lack of breeze, I assumed that the poltergeist was still in the room, watching me, and if it did indeed have eyes, making sure that I drank. I took a few tentative sips and found that it was just tap water, and then drained the glass in relief. The poltergeist gently eased the glass out of my hand and sprinted it away into the kitchen, where the hiss of rushing faucets and the squeak of towel against glass indicated that this thing was one for cleaning up after itself. It didn't seem befitting of a poltergeist to be a neat freak. A rush of wind signaled its return to the room, and my body tensed up with anticipation. You don't lay a person down somewhere comfortable and get them a drink if you plan to kill them, do you? This thought seemed to be the most pressing of all the ones flooding into my mind, but I figured it made about as much sense to apply logic to this as it did to apply to a Saturday morning cartoon. The very existence of this thing proved that there were some pretty significant holes in conventional logic. Nothing happened. It seemed to stay still in the center of the room, like it was waiting for me to do something, to do anything. It just kept standing there, almost utterly motionless. "Are you going to hurt me?" I found myself whispering through trembling lips. The poltergeist offered another cluster of unintelligible clicks. The room was silent for a few solid minutes after that. Okay, I said, regaining some of my composure. I need to know some things, and for that, I need to ask you some things. If the answer to any of my questions is yes, tap twice on the wall. If the answer is no, just tap once. Do you understand? A brief pause. Tap, tap. Are you going to hurt me? Tap. I breathed a sigh of relief. Good. Thank you. Have you been here for a while? Tap, tap. Over a week? Tap, tap. Over a year? Tap. There was some minor relief to be taken in that, I'm sure. Have you been stealing my underwear? There was a pause that seemed to scream embarrassment. Tap, tap. Am I allowed to leave? The creature's fist seemed to slam onto the wall, leaving an apple-sized crater in the bricks and sending cracks slithering from all directions. Tap. It's been a week since I last wrote, and the poltergeist has been keeping me quarantined in my own home. I can't count the number of times I've cursed myself for being antisocial before, when I've previously gone off the grid for a few days. It's never mattered, and now, nobody's coming to look for me. I'm sure that in its own mind, it's been awfully accommodating to such an ungrateful guest. It's cleaned the cups and dishes every night and done my laundry every morning. It prepares me meals that it assumes I'll enjoy from the increasingly sparse assortment of ingredients in the house. Last night, in its frustration, it made me a steaming bowl of graham crackers, microwaved in a goldfish and spearmint toothpaste bisque. It threw all of my plates against the walls when I was gagging too much to finish it. We haven't been communicating a great deal. In fact, I think it decided to give me the silent treatment after my last failed escape, a rather futile attempt to climb out of the second-story bathroom window. All in all, I guess its response was pretty measured. It couldn't have broken more than 3 of my toes. The one question that's been needing an answer from the outset, the one I've been needing to ask but only last night realized the importance of, is whether the poltergeist was in love with me. Tap. Fucking tap. I'd been a well-behaved girl since it broke my toes, trying to play by its increasingly meticulous rules. Rules, I might add, that you can only learn through trial and error. I'm sure once again that in its own mind, it was something of a gentleman. It had never hurt me unless the punishment was proportional to my perceived crime. Escape, disobedience, ungratefulness. For something so powerful, it was easy to upset. What's more, there was no real way of telling whether it was even around you at any given time, so you'd always have to assume that it was. The only place in this house that seemed off limits to the evil bastard was inside my head, so that's where I conducted all of my planning. The poltergeist had ripped the landline out of the wall on day 2, but the cell phone in my drawer in my bedside cabinet, the love-struck monster didn't seem to know about that. I poured myself a glass of Coke and drank it, leaving some noticeable residue at the bottom to make sure that the clean freak poltergeist would take the bait. Stepping back a little, I watched my trap unfold. Just as expected, the glass rose from the countertop and a dish towel was yanked from the kitchen radiator. Perfect. This gave me an idea of where its body was. Knowing how quickly the bastard could move, I lunged out and ripped a chef's knife from my knife rack. And while the poltergeist was busy polishing glass, I drove it into what must have been the creature's chest. It let out an ear-piercing shriek. Black blood squirted from nowhere onto the freshly cleaned glass. Not wanting to waste the few seconds of precious time that this bought me, I tore my way up the stairs to the bedroom, hearing the poltergeist's monstrous screams as they rang out from the kitchen. I leapt through the doorway and slammed the door behind me, locking it, bolting it, and jamming a stool underneath the doorknob. Knowing that this wouldn't hold the creature for long, the second I'd done it, I sprang over to my bedside cabinet and started hammering in 911 so fast I felt as though my fingers would snap under the pressure. Something big and pissed off was rumbling up the stairs. Before the police dispatcher could even get halfway through her scripted spiel, I found myself screaming like a madwoman into the receiver. Something is in my house and it's trying to fucking kill me. Something, ma'am? The poltergeist was hammering frantically on the door now. I wasn't intending to let the truth get in the way of me being rescued. Someone, he's got a fucking gun, and he's armed. I'm locked in and he's hammering down my goddamn door. I held the receiver towards the door so the dispatcher could hear the banging. You're gonna need to knock down my front door or he's going to fucking murder me. I've dispatched some officers, ma'am. ETA is about 2 minutes. Can you stay on the line? The door splintered into toothpicks with a defeating boom. The poltergeist had gotten in. I screamed at the top of my lungs as it cleared the room. My phone exploded in my hand and I felt the white-hot pain of the creature's hand striking me across the cheek, knocking me into my bed. I could already feel my cheeks swelling as livid bruises started to rise under the skin of my face. This is it, I thought. I'm going to die. Things went slowly after that. I could hear the poltergeist's low growl as it circled the bed, and I could see the black blood squirting from thin air, splattering onto my duvet. I knew that it was planning its next move, calculating an appropriate punishment for my indiscretion. A cold hand began pressing down on my chest, though I couldn't see it. I felt it compressing, crushing the life out of me, like some kind of living asthma attack. Though it wasn't killing me, no, that wouldn't be the proper treatment for the person it's obsessed with over all of these months. It was just holding me still. I felt the springs in my mattress groans as the poltergeist crawled onto the bed, keeping its hands on the center of my chest, all that black blood trailing further across the duvet. With its free hand, it tugged at the button fastening my jeans and awkwardly tried to open it. Realizing what it was doing, I started kicking and screaming at the top of my lungs. The creature's hand shot to my throat and squeezed me into silence, while its free hand carried on working haphazardly at my jeans. My eyes scanned the room, looking for some sort of weapon or method to escape. In the end, they were just fixated on the body-length mirror that sat in front of the bed, or rather, what was in the mirror. While I couldn't see the poltergeist directly, even while it was straddling me and trying to consummate our one-sided relationship, I could see its reflection in the mirror as clear as day. From what I could see, the poltergeist was long and hairless, its built almost skeletal and its skin having that coarse, crispy quality of burnt newspaper. I could see its ribs and the protruding vertebrae of its spine pulsing inwards and outwards with every labored breath. The fucking monster looked like death itself. It had finally managed to wrestle open the button on my jeans and began peeling down the zipper in a slow, perverted delight. I could tell that the poltergeist was getting excited because its hand was tightening around my throat and the terrible blood was squirting onto me with greater pressure and frequency. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" I heard the cop shout from downstairs. In the mirror, I saw the creature's head turn to find the origin of the sound. A distraction. Its grip loosened. It was finally my chance. With all of my energy, I leaned over to the nightstand and grabbed my bedside lamp, and with all of the fury and hatred that I had built up over the week that I'd been a prisoner, I smashed the base of the lamp into the side of the poltergeist's head. Once wasn't enough for me. I smashed it again and again and again until its grip loosened and its hand drew away from my neck. "Help!" I screamed, louder than I'd ever screamed anything. "Somebody please help me!" As the officers heard my desperate pleas and began smashing down my front door, the mirror told me that the poltergeist was still recovering from the blows, so I sped past it and ran down the stairs to safety. Tears streamed down my cheeks when I saw the two officers standing in the hallway, both of their pistols drawn. "Thank God you're here," I screamed. "We need to get out of here." I grabbed one of the officers and held him close to me and gave the other one a stern look. "We need to take care of this threat," he said. His voice was as cold and hard as the poltergeist's hands. No, I insist. It doesn't matter, we need to get out of here right now." The officer had already started mounting the stairs. His pistol was out in front of him. "I'll secure the area. Officer Harvey, can you escort her out?" I saw a single drip of black blood hit the steps in front of the nameless officer. The officer turned and faced us to see what had happened, and his gun was batted unceremoniously from his hands. His head whipped around towards the poltergeist in shock, and just didn't stop. It twisted a full 360 degrees before falling away from his shoulders and tumbling down the stairs, the neck of his collapsing body spraying arcs of blood. I recoiled in horror, while Officer Harvey lunged forward and began firing blindly up the stairs, screaming while he did it. One of his bullets must have clipped the poltergeist because it let out a monstrous roar, but it wasn't enough to save him. As I scrambled through the open doorway, I heard Officer Harvey scream as his legs snapped. He collapsed, face down to the ground, and was dragged back into the hallway. I couldn't bear to turn around as I sprinted towards my car, but I could hear screaming and growling and meaty tearing sounds echoing from behind me. The poltergeist had effortlessly killed 2 people, armed police officers at that, and soon it would be coming for me. I leaped into the driver's seat of my Honda Civic and stabbed the keys into the ignition. I started the engine, got in gear, and prepared to slam my foot down so hard that the pedal would be touching concrete. But I had to steal one last look at my house from the rearview mirror. The poltergeist was stepping out over the threshold, its black eyes burning with fury. Its lipless mouth hung open, lined with teeth like broken glass, growling and hissing. Its chest was torn and ragged from the knife wounds and gunshots. Its genitals were long, twisted, and covered in what looked like thorns. Its hands and feet, which shuddered and twitched in anger, were fitted with shimmering claws rather than fingers. It seemed to know that I was seeing it properly for the first time, and I bet it was glad. It was glad that I could see its hatred for me oozing out of its every movement. I slammed down on the gas and tore away from my house. I drove and drove and drove without a destination in mind. My home wasn't my home anymore, and there were 2 dead cops in there, one headless and the other probably worse. For all intents and purposes, my life as I knew it was over. This all happened maybe 5 or 6 hours ago as I write this, from the room of the motel where I'm staying. I ditched the car over a mile away and walked, worried that the poltergeist would recognize it, and without a mirror on hand, I have no hope of seeing it coming, though I have no doubt in my mind that soon it will. This brings my sad little tale to a close, I guess. The book's open until the poltergeist comes and closes it for me, but in what might be my last few hours on Earth, I can't help but consider the possibility. If there are things in this world that we can't see, or at least not conventionally, what do you think are the chances of that being the only one? That is the end of that story. I get so freaked out. I think these are the ones that I find the scariest, are things about ghosts or paranormal activity. Like, they're just so scary to me because I believe in all of this stuff. And I kind of just wanted to throw this out there because I haven't mentioned this in any videos yet. I think this video is going up on Wednesday. All of my videos from here on out are pre-recorded videos that I got prepared for myself for VidCon. But yeah, I'll be at VidCon in like a week because this is going up Wednesday. Not the Wednesday that we're leaving for VidCon, but like the Wednesday before. But I haven't mentioned it, and since all my videos are pre-recorded, I don't have time to mention it, but yeah. But in a week from now, I will be on my way to VidCon, and I'm really excited. But anyways, I won't ramble about all that kind of stuff. I think my friends are gonna have a meetup, and I'll probably just like go. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!